Hello, I am so very excited to have Dr. Vera Tarman on with me this evening. And Dr. Tarman, I am so honored that you're here, and I cannot wait for this discussion because this is so near and dear to my heart, having suffered with food addiction for, I say since I was gifted an easy bake oven at the age of, I think it was 7.
Right.
So Dr. Tarman is an addiction physician with a special interest in sugar and food addiction. She's the author of the book Food Junkies Recovery from Addiction, and she's the co-host of the weekly Food Junkies podcast, and she moderates a free Facebook group called I'm Sweet Enough, Sugar-Free for Life. She is herself in recovery from food addiction, as many of us are, and I know many of you watching are. And I know this isn't really the significant part of your success story, but I know you've lost 100 pounds and maintained that weight loss, but that really is secondary to overcoming the addiction, because as you know and I know, and us in this space, that it is one of the very, very most difficult addictions to overcome. So welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking me. I'm always happy to proselytize on this issue.
Yeah. So let me see first how I can pull us over to the side. Here we go. Okay. No, I'm going to go back this way. So abstinence is really the reality of recovery. It has been for me and in all my experience with any addiction. So if you could comment on this too, and I say moderation is the quick route back to addiction.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And in the addiction world, we say, one drink is too much, or one drug, whatever it is, including sugar, is too much, and then 1,000 is never enough. So the concept of abstinence is crucial for recovery, and that has to do with the fact that we first of all have to recognize that this is a drug, and by introducing a drug into your system, there is a neuroadaptation that occurs over time, not right away, but over time. Some people more quickly than others. And when that process happens, which we then essentially call addiction, when that process has happened, there is no going back to just moderation. Moderation is for the people who have not yet become addicted. I'm actually going to be talking next week in the UK. There's the International Food Addiction Consensus conference in the UK, where we're all getting together, a lot of the people who've been in the field for some time. And I thought, no other place do I want to talk about the importance of abstinence, because in the addiction world, we don't call the term moderation, we call the term harm reduction. People don't want to quit their substance. They don't want to quit sugar. Like if I say you have to quit, it's like, well, I'm not interested. Can I go somewhere else? Maybe Dr. Lisa can give me a different answer.
Somebody's got to give you the answer I want to hear.
Exactly. It's not the answer I want to hear. So a lot of people will say, okay, well then, we won't push that agenda right away. But I'm just saying, I think you're going to agree with me that you're just delaying the inevitable, and it's actually harder to moderate than it is to actually abstain, and that has all to do with the biology of how addiction works. It's got nothing to do with willpower. And when a person uses that term moderation and thinks they can do it, they still think they have willpower, and they may, if they're not yet addicted to whatever substance that we're talking about, food, they may still have willpower. But if you're listening and you're thinking, I don't have any willpower, then moderation is impossible, because the only way it would work is if you have willpower.
Yeah, and I always say it's like changing seats on the Titanic. When you think you're going to do something like that, it's you're still going down. You might be going down in a different path, but it is not possible in my experience personally, and in all the coaching years. There is no way you can moderate by eating half of a cupcake, right?
Right, and it's because there's an actual biological change that has happened, where willpower takes a back seat to the addiction, and this is we have to acknowledge that. That's why I like to talk about this to as many people as I can to validate that this is a condition. It's a bit like telling the crack addict, okay, just have a little bit here and there. We just know that that's not possible. And what we have to do is recognize that food has, well, you said it in the intro, it has a powerful, it's almost not on the radar because so many people have it, but it has a powerful hook on us. And it's actually more powerful, I think, than cocaine and even crystal meth. I've had crystal meth addicts, because I'm an addictions doctor, I see the whole range, who have said to me, okay, I finally quit crystal meth, but I can't quit sugar. They have such a struggle quitting sugar, or they quit alcohol because they've gone to sugar. So it is the Titanic, but the I think where the what do we call it? The anchor is in the sugar, because people go to that and then they get stuck there.
Or they think that's the benign thing to
Yes.
cross-addict onto, or they don't realize they're cross-addicting. But,
Yes.
you know, it's one of those things where when you give something up, where is that energy going to? You're trying to fill an emotional void somehow, and
Yes.
you're reaching for something. And sugar is so widely accepted. Processed food sugar is everywhere. It doesn't seem like it's another drug and like, uh-oh, don't do that. Like everybody's just like, oh, let's serve all the desserts at the AA meeting.
Yes.
And the coffee. Let's go on to caffeine too. We could get on that.
Yeah. And that void actually has been created. It's like you've dug the hole deeper with the sugar. So, you know, that void that a person's trying to avoid on the transfer of addictions, it just gets worse.
Worsens.
It worsens. With any addiction, whatever it is, you're digging a hole deeper into the addiction. So we have to deal with this by using the tools of addiction, which, as we said at the beginning, is abstinence number one.
Yeah. Can you speak to the issue of, is it known what tendency it is to have this be, is this genetic at all?
Yeah. Well, okay. So, I don't, I'm trying to think of how I can start this. Let's talk about prevalence. A lot of people will say, you know, sugar addiction, what is it? And I think we don't see it because it is so prevalent. It is so out there. Like every time I do a public talk to people who don't know, I mean, you're asking me, but you already have your own story. You know, like I'm preaching to the converted here, but sometimes I'm not. And people will come up to me later and go, oh, geez, are you kidding? Maybe I have a problem. I think maybe my wife does, or whatever. So once they really get what we're talking about, that it's not this bizarre thing, that it's actually everywhere, and everyone who's listening probably has some element of it, it becomes more obvious. So we have statistics that say that probably about 15% of the population, maybe 20, have food addiction. But I actually think, and then if we look at subcategories, like the people with obesity, that's even higher. That could be 40 to 50% of that population. Women more than men. There's, depending on what population, there'll be more than 15 or 20%. But that's a sort of figure that we're giving. But I personally think that almost, maybe I'm exaggerating to say all of us, but I think that at some level on the continuum, a lot more than 20% have it. So they're somewhat addicted. We would call that heavy users.
Yeah, that's why I always come down to thinking there's a spectrum.
Yes,
and
spectrum.
I'm going to say almost everybody's on the spectrum.
Yes.
It's just where you fall.
Yeah. And if you're seeking help, you're probably at the closer end to more addicted than not. Because otherwise,
I'll raise my hand to feel like I'm president of the club.
Yeah, right.
You know, so all right, let's look at this. Physical sobriety and relapse. There is no cheating. If you keep using, you cannot recover.
Yeah.
And falling into that damn carb ditch continues your addiction. This is a reality of what we have to really think about.
Yeah, that's true. So when we talk about what do people get addicted to, probably the universal is sugar and refined carbohydrates. We have in the like the conference that I'm going to next week, and in the larger food addiction community, we're kind of struggling with, well, what actually should we call this thing? You can't be addicted to all foods. And so some people have said, well, it should be sugar. Some people say refined carbohydrates. Some people just say, let's say carb addiction, because it's the carbohydrates that seem to cause the most problem. And then other people say which is likely where we're going to land, it's probably ultra processed food addiction, which definitely includes carbohydrates and sugar. But actually, I think that you can be addicted to fat too. You can be addicted to more than just carbohydrates, but that's usually where it starts.
And how about like salt
Yeah, well,
and nuts
yes,
and pork
absolutely.
rinds,
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So
we could just keep going.
it can just keep going, and that's part of the jumping on the Titanic, the various ships. But usually starts with sugar and carb addiction. And one of the things, so that's the reason why I'm so happy that the carb, like the sugar addiction group, we've been ignored forever. Like people just don't want to hear our message. But the people who have made inroads into making change in the dietary world have been the carnivore and the keto movement, and they've made huge changes. And it's like, that's fabulous. And part of the reason is because they have stumbled upon, without realizing it, the sugar addiction solution, which is stop the damn sugar and the refined carbohydrates, which they did because they're going low carb. And they're going keto. It's just, but the problem is if you don't understand the dynamic of addiction, of food addiction, then you might get tripped up by some of those keto treats, because the food industry is very smart. They're going to the communities that are niche and that are all excited, and they'll go, well, we're gonna put our stuff in, like the pork rinds. We're gonna put our stuff in that community and get them back to us.
Or even the keto cookies and the
yes,
keto
exactly.
bricks and all this stuff. And there's so many mimicking foods that us addicts are grasping to try to get back at. But heck, yeah. I can binge on keto cheese chaffles, where you make these waffles out of cheddar cheese and egg. And boy, I want 10 of them. I don't want 2. So therein lies, now that's where I feel like I'm proving I'm up here on the spectrum, Vera.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's not just carbohydrates, but that is usually where it starts.
Yeah. So for what I have ended up terming it, for so many times that I've replied in messages and DMs and emails, I refer to it as being carb sober. And what I talk about, then sometimes I'll say sugar, grains, processed foods are the most problematic. But I just blanket it to say my community is carb sober freedom. It's being free from that attachment and that addiction to that drug, and trying to explain to people this truly is a drug and you have to take it seriously. And if you're at a party and you're looking at a plate of whatever, maybe it's even something simple like just nachos, it's not donuts, but I say you have to look at that all like it's a syringe of heroin, and you cannot touch it if you want freedom from that bondage, and it's horrible.
Yeah,
All right. So what I'd like you now to comment on is here. Do you have a recommended food plan? Because as you've mentioned, the keto and the carnivore world has really propelled the exposing sugar as a true drug and sugar as an addiction, and that people, raise my hand again, are addicted to food, because a lot of people say you can't possibly be addicted to food. Everybody needs food, and that's ridiculous. Well, no, it's not. And that this is really what has, for me, resolved my misery. So what is your commentary? Because I can binge on mangoes. I can't moderate them. So
I because I believe that there is, like you said, a spectrum. I think that there's also a spectrum of solutions. I think that we have to go for the universal, which is sugar, because it is a drug. Like sugar is not, of course, I'm talking about refined sugar that's taken out of fruits and vegetables. That is just like tobacco, just like heroin, just like anything else. I mean, those drugs, if they were within where they started, they would not be as addictive. Like cocaine comes from the cocoa leaf, and if we just chewed cocoa leaves, none of us would be addicted to cocaine. It's the fact that we've extracted it and taken it out that's made it potent. And the same with sugar. So if we're just eating fruits and vegetables, we're not likely to become addicted to sugar. So therefore, just avoid the drug sugar, which is the extraction from carbohydrates. That would be the first thing. But if you are already damaged, so you use the word carb sober, I use the word carb sensitive. I mean, we're talking about the same thing. If you have had these biological changes, which I referred to earlier, neuroadaptations, now you are not as carb robust, and therefore you may not be able to eat fruits. So you mentioned, like I would say, no sugar and no flour, like refined carbohydrates, out the door for the first. And then for people who are more carb damaged or carb sensitive, they may have to stop fruits. And in some cases, they may have to stop some of the starchy vegetables. And definitely, I don't want to say definitely, but often grains as well. So it depends on where you are in that spectrum. So depending on where you are, a carnivore would work, or a low carb, or a keto. It just depends on where you are. And I wouldn't recommend that, unless you have reasons other than food cravings, to go on something like carnivore. I mean, there's other good reasons to do that, if you've got inflammation or other health reasons. But if you're doing it just for dietary restriction, if you restrict too much and you don't need to, then what might happen is that you'll just back off. It won't be a relief, like that relief of cravings. It'll just be a restriction, and then you'll say, I can't do this anymore, it's too restrictive, and I'm leaving.
Right, but so then what is it that particular person, you're saying it, maybe that's too restrictive?
Yeah.
So what, like, could and should they include? Salad? I can binge on a salad. You put that delicious salad dressing and cheese on it, right?
So I would suggest that when a person thinks they have a problem, first of all, they work with somebody. So they have a coach, a food coach, a nutritionist, somebody. It could be a sponsor, but you have to make sure that they know what they're talking about. You want to work with somebody else, and then you say, okay, we're going to quit the sugar and the refined carbohydrates. Now I'm going to take a experiment and see if I can handle nuts, or I can handle dairy. And if I have a response like you, where I'll just eat the whole bag and more, then no, that's out. That's a trigger food. It's not sugar. It's not a refined carb, but it's a trigger food. It could be popcorn. I couldn't eat popcorn. Well, I still can't eat popcorn. Just like that is a trigger food. So you have to define, but that might not be a trigger food for you, for somebody else, but it is for you. And even over time, a person may have been able to eat, let's say, grains, and then over time, 5 or 10 years later, they can't anymore. So it's a continual. Usually, your sign is when you feel compelled, like you said, that the food obsession is coming back, and you can't stop at one. That's usually your warning. That is now a trigger food, and you have to stop it. But if it's not, and you can moderate, then it means it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah. And, even thinking though about things like fruit, they've been modified to be sugar bombs now.
Absolutely.
Back ancient, ancestrally, the cherries were tart, right? The apples were crab apples. They are so changed now that, in my thinking, I don't know how any of us in this food addiction world could possibly be okay moderating fruit. I mean, I would clean strawberries for my kids, and every other one would go in my mouth. And I'm like, what am I doing? This is supposed to be a berry, and I'm supposed to be able to moderate this. Oh no. Oh no. All right. So if you could now comment on this, the tracking, where we weigh and measure the food. And I personally have reason to believe my normal hunger and satiety signals have been destroyed by my food addiction. So I don't really have a good turn on, turn off point. But others may say that all the tracking leads to obsessing about food. And I find it gives me freedom and peace around food. So all of these mixed things drive me crazy. And some people, I feel, especially with the the food plan and thinking it's too restrictive. Well, sometimes I think that's the addictive brain saying, oh no, this isn't going to work for you. Let's get right back in on it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're on the same page there. Again, depending on the spectrum of addiction, weighing and measuring sometimes is really necessary, because exactly for what you're saying. Like theoretically, if you're not that addicted, once you get out of the toxic food drug environment and you're just eating regular foods, you should be able to intuitively know when your body is full and when you're hungry. Like that, those cues should be sort of
innate.
Exactly, they should be innate. But what ends up happening is exactly what you said, that the drives false hunger. It's not real hunger, it's false hunger. That is what addiction gives, overwhelms and over hijacks our natural cues, to the point where you can never really trust those natural cues anymore. And so some people can ballpark their food and say, I'm going to have 4 ounces, which is the size of the palm of my hand or something like that, of something. But others will say, no, the addictive mind will make that palm bigger than it really is, because we have a remarkable capacity to lie to ourselves.
Or boy, I did a lot of walking and exercise. I need
Yes.
2 palms today.
Exactly. So weighing and measuring is a way of taking it out of your hands. You just say, I'm just going to have 4 ounces or 6 ounces or whatever it is of whatever food it is. And I plan that even ahead of time. So those are extra steps that another person will say, I don't need to do that, and they may not. And so again, why impose that restriction? But if you have an intuitive sense, if it gives you relief, that's a sign that you should be doing it. If it is a problem, then you can see. But if you keep slipping, then it like, that's the thing about, you don't want to do this by yourself, because the addict mind will always tell you to do something that is not in your favor. But if, let's say, Lisa, if you were my coach or my person, I would say, I think I want to try this. And then you would say, well, what about when you did this before? And how did that work? And I say, yeah, it didn't work. Okay, could this be the addict speaking? Like, I need to have somebody to call me on it, because we can't figure this out ourselves.
Yeah, I call it the ditch demon up there, who is rooting you on as hard as possible at any potential trigger.
Yes.
Wherever you are, whatever's happening, whatever somebody's saying to you, oh, I don't want to offend the host, I better try it, or whatever it is. It's that ditch demon that's saying, go, go. Let's get in it. Come on.
Yeah, and the other thing that's good about weighing and measuring is that there is also, I believe, a phenomenon called volume addiction, where I can eat even too many carrots, even too many celery, whatever, even too much meat. Like, I can just eat too much of even the healthiest thing. And so the volume addiction, are you full? You don't know if you're full, because you said you lose that false hunger, will override natural hunger. And so I gotta weigh so that I don't rely on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so let's go on to this one, the old labeling foods that we hear from so many people. You cannot label foods good versus bad. And experts saying if you eliminate an entire food group, you're being obsessive and harmful. Well, guess what? Good for me is a ribeye, bad is a donut. And any food that I don't have sober behavior around is actually bad for me. And I don't care what you want to label it, it's bad, because I don't ever in my life want to go back to that hellhole I was in. So yes, I mean, we don't have to call it good and bad. I just call it what is acceptable to put in my mouth and what isn't.
Yeah. I think that's a bit of a little trick from the food industry to normalize drug foods. And so then if I call it what it is, which is a drug food, they'll say, yeah, you're making it bad. Well, we call smoking cigarettes bad. And it's bad for you, because it's a substance that you're putting into your lungs and damaging them. But the cigarette industry for the longest time tried to obfuscate, I can never say that word. They tried to muddle that argument to say that's not, we don't really know if that's true. So it's just the food industry saying, basically a drug food, it's not even a food, it's a food product. It's an industrialized food thing. I just want to call it what it is. That's
bad. Capital B, bad.
That's bad. You just say it's bad for me. It's unhealthy for me. We can say, let's just scrap those words and say healthy and unhealthy. This stuff is unhealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay. Fasting, intermittent, extended. It's all the rage of discussion because it's the whole biohacking thing and autophagy, but intense hunger, sometimes created by this fasting, can trigger relapse and binges in susceptible people. That's my experience. But I have to say, I pull back and make the commentary that intermittent fasting it's hard to really just say that term is a forced fast, because when you eat a certain way, carnivore, if you're in ketosis, if I eat dinner at 5 and I'm not hungry until lunch the next day, technically is that intermittent fasting? Yeah, but it's my natural cycle. So I don't call that intermittent fasting. I'm talking about forced fasting where you're pushing past the point of hunger for a purpose.
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree with you on that one. I'm actually one of the people who, because it's so popular out there, that usually discourages people from intermittent fasting or fasting outright, like for a prolonged period of time, for exactly that reason. For a new recovery, a person in new food addiction recovery, hunger is a tremendous point of relapse, and especially for a person who's not yet, like, they've just stopped eating junk food, they haven't yet fat adapted, they haven't uh, they still have carbohydrates in their system, and they're going to have a sugar crash, like a hypoglycemic crash, and that is extremely painful, will lead to binging and that kind of negative behavior. What I would suggest is that people have either 2 or 3 regular meals and then don't eat in between. So there is a fasting in between meals. There's none of this snacking.
Which is normal for human
Yes.
beings.
Yes, and I completely agree with that. I'm somebody that needs to have 3 meals a day. Maybe if I did more carnivore, I wouldn't need that, but that's comfortable for me, but I would not eat in between. But other people I know don't need to do that. But that's just basically a level of how comfortable a person is eating well. And then you want to have appropriate hunger, but you don't want to be starving, because that's going to lead you into binge behavior.
Yeah.
When a person wants to do intermittent fasting, I would say, first of all, make sure that your food is quiet in your head, that the foods that you're eating don't create this false hunger, and then make sure that you're not truly hungry. Like, make sure you're eating enough and enough fats and enough proteins so that you are full, and you're not and that you're fat adapted to some degree, and then you can try to do what you talked about, so that it does feel like a natural process.
Yeah. All right. This next one's a biggie, because it is so prevalent in so much of what is out there, but I
Right.
need you to talk on this, just because it's in so many products that so many people cling to for dear life. And they're like deers in the headlight when I tell them you have to get rid of taste of sweet.
Yes.
You're triggering the sweet sensor on your tongue. It's no bueno.
Yeah. Yes. Well, first of all, I would throw out honey anyway, because that is sugar. Like, it's sugar.
Yeah, I threw it in there because a lot of people are throwing
No.
that in their drinks and on their food, thinking it's okay. And
Yeah, well, it's not okay. And then the sweeteners, it's exactly what you said. Like, so here's where there's some discussion, again, looking at the spectrum. It seems to me that if a person comes and says, I want to, it's not about weight loss. It's really, it's about what will keep my mind quiet from food and wanting more. And if I introduce anything that promotes that desire for sweet, just like you said, then you're going to continually want more. But some people will use the sweeteners as a harm reduction tool. So it'll get the person in the door, be willing to quit sugar, so that we'll give them this sweetener thing. But so I would say, okay, that's fine. But if you want full peace, you're going to have to get rid of that too. And it's a bit like if you're quitting smoking, you put the patch on, or you chew the nicotine gum. But you still have to get off of the nicotine at some point, because you're still wanting something. You're still somewhat addicted. So, and even though it's the sweetener doesn't give the same dopamine surplus, it still gives something. So, because there's that anticipation of sweet, which then confuses the body. So, to be pure, it would be to stop them. If you want to use it as a bridge, it can be a bridge. But again, I would say work with somebody.
yeah.
Yeah.
The thing with the sweetener, somebody says, oh, I put it in my coffee every morning and it doesn't trigger me. But then I find out they're chewing gum the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And I said, well, why do you think you need to put it in again the next day and the next day? You're triggering this ongoing addiction. And
Yeah.
bottom line, this is a chemical that a company has made and packaged and you're putting in your
Yes.
body.
Yeah.
If you want health, we have to get rid of these things that are made by a company.
Yes. And the thing that's interesting, that you kind of applied is the person will say, well, it doesn't trigger me to have more, but they are still wanting more of something. It may not be like, you might think, okay, well, I'm able to have a little bit of dark chocolate with the, a sweetener in it, and I'm okay because I don't want more. But then if they're opening the fridge wanting more of something else, that means something has been spurred up that wouldn't have been spurred up. So it's not necessarily that you'll want more of that substance. You'll want more of something. And that's often the tool right there, or the cue.
Yeah, and talk, it's no different with people who have a diet Coke addiction.
Mm,
I mean, I could go on and on about what these little things that people think are just a-okay. And
yeah.
ultimately, it's just because I want people to feel that freedom and peace around food. And this is a tough one. And I totally get what you're saying with harm reduction. And of course, there is, chewing gum is better than chewing donuts. But I would say, you know what? Cross over onto some bacon, and a pound of bacon is better than a bite of cookie, and get off of the chemicals and just try it, white knuckle it for 90 days and see what your experience is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
All right. So how about this planned return to use? Implications of thinking I could ever eat fruit again or moderate anything with the taste of sweet, to me, makes me cringe, because there is just no way in Haiti that that's ever going to happen for me. And again, we could go back to this spectrum thing and how far off, someone is. But for me to even think I'm going to moderate blueberries, I know it seems so silly, Vera, to think that I'm not eating blueberries, but I want to eat the whole pint. And then I
Yes.
want to I can't moderate avocado. I can't. So, I guess, I'm at the far end. Where are you on the spectrum, Vera? And what kind of carbs do you eat that you have sober behavior around?
I would say I'm a pretty severe food addict. I weigh and measure my food, which I feel the most comfortable. It is a nuisance, but it is a comfort. And I eat enough proteins and fats. I have to follow within the food plan that I get my support from. I would say that I eat, I don't know, in terms of amounts, 2 to 4 ounces of, usually I try to go for 2 ounces of carbs like onions or mushrooms in the morning, along with my protein, and then about 4 or so in the afternoon, and then at dinner, up to 8 of not starchy vegetables. So that would be lettuce. I'm just thinking what I'm having tonight: lettuce, cucumber, mushroom, a bit of onion, and rice cauliflower. I'm a big fan of rice cauliflower. So that's about no more than 8 ounces of that, and then fruit. So I guess in total, it's, I don't know, what is that? 8, 10, 12, about that much ounces in a day. And then the rest is protein and fat. So I consider, I guess a better way to say that is I eat about 50 to 60 grams of carbs a day. That would probably be the better way to say that.
Yeah.
I have tried to go lower than that, but I find that for me, I don't know if it's always a work in progress, right? I'm sure you're always.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, and I listen to.
I've tried to go lower. I just find that I get too hungry.
Yeah, well, I listen to the rice cauliflower and I'm thinking I'm cooking it in butter and I want to eat 5 cups of it.
Oh, yeah.
But I get it. You're supposed to measure it and be mindful and all of that. But that's
Well, I
where.
definitely weigh and measure. I don't go beyond what yeah.
Yeah. So that's a whole different kind of discipline versus me just saying, nope, I don't want to see, and then I would want to make a double batch so I don't have to cook tomorrow and then wrap up the second part, but then I would not probably wrap up the second part. And
well, that's how I find the weighing and measuring is very helpful. I could probably have more cauliflower, but I actually don't want to. I'm fine. And part of it is that the weighing and measuring does its guardrails. It closes that door. If I broke those rules, because it's always possible to break the rules, then I'd know that that's no longer a food I can eat. Yeah, like I used to eat, I don't know, fried or not fried, roasted squash or something like that. And then I found there was no way I could do that anymore. I just wanted more of it. So again, it's a process of experimenting and over time realizing what I used to be able to eat, I can't eat anymore. I expect that as I get older, I might have to reduce my carbs even more. I'm hoping that I'll feel less hungry then.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when, something like onions and making it like in an omelet, I'm thinking it's caramelizing because of the sugars in it. And
Yes,
it's,
that's
again,
true.
a trigger food for me.
Yes.
And, I wish sometimes I think to myself, why can't I be normal? Why can't I just even eat
You
some?
forget about normal. It's more just that's what your body is, and some of it is damaged from previous eating, and some of it's genetic too. Like there is a genetic component to addiction. But let me just ask you: does that mean that are you more of a carnivore then?
Oh yeah, for
Yeah,
15 years.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's like that's you don't eat any carbs at all.
No.
Then that you see that's probably because that's where you need to be, and that makes sense. Like it's fine.
Yeah, yeah, and it's worked well for 15 years. I'm hoping it will keep going. So, and I'm even experimenting. This is why this is an interesting conversation for me to have with you as far as the spectrum and the severity,
Yes.
because I'm even at a point, and I share this openly on my YouTube videos and in my membership group, that I'm realizing that I don't keep cheese in my refrigerator anymore because I
Right.
don't have sober behavior. I want to fry it, I want to melt it, I want to eat
Yeah.
it with
I
a
don't eat
spoon.
cheese either for that reason.
But here we go. Want to listen to this? I don't keep bacon in the fridge because if I cook a pound, I want to eat a pound, even though I
Yes.
want to just keep some in the fridge for a quick little on the go snack or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't have sober behavior with bacon. It's salty, it's crunchy, it's fatty, it's
Yeah.
good. I can't, I, now, of course, according to you, though, I should weigh and measure and say, okay, 4 slices, I'll enter it into my tracker. But
Well,
the sixth through 10th slice is sitting there and I'm
and
stressed. I am
yeah,
angry. I am procrastinating on doing work, whatever it is. I'm like, the bacon is screaming at me. Just finish it so you don't have to think about it anymore. And
exactly. Then don't. Yeah.
that's how I
Then
used to think about that other crap food that I was so addicted to. So I'm like, I
absolutely.
can't have this. I
I
can't have a bag of pork rinds in the cabinet either.
yeah. I would agree with you completely. It's a trigger food, and if the weighing and measuring is not enough, then don't do it. Like get rid of that food for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
So tough. All right. Emotional sobriety and cross addiction. And what are we turning to for relief of emotions now that we're abstaining from our addictive comfort foods that we used to use to fill these emotional voids?
Yeah. This is a hard one because a person a person with addiction has like we have to learn how to live life quote on life's terms, and sometimes life is just boring, sometimes life is just it's not the excitement that we're expecting, and it's excitement on demand when you have food or drugs or cigarettes or whatever, social media that you can do. It's that's just not what it is. So it, and we haven't learned how to behave in that way. Certainly society is not teaching us, and often when we were young teens and young adults and living today, we're not learning those tools, like the tools on how to be silent, how to listen, how to be quiet, how to tolerate moods, because moods do have their own lifespan. They don't go on forever.
Being able to sit in it.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
And
mean,
know that it will pass if you sit in it. Is
yeah.
it's actually really hard. I have to admit I struggle with that because I can be busy all the time. And I veer towards that. And I have to tell myself, slow down, because it's not just that I got to do all these things. I'm forcing myself to do all these things because I don't want to be still. And I as an addict in remission, I'm still somebody who wants that excitement as a go-to, and I have to constantly check. And we call that a spiritual discipline. It's a discipline. It's a discipline to say, okay, how do I slow down today? maybe in the morning, it's have a couple of minutes of quiet, or throughout the day, you discipline yourself to get off that treadmill of dopamine excitement, which is it's invited everywhere we go.
Do you subscribe to the meditation, yoga, philosophy, like doing some sort of, let's just say distractive kind of thing? Or, do you have anything in particular that you sometimes recommend?
Yeah, so that is an ideal. Like, I think that's great. Now, within the context of meditation, there are different types of meditation. So it's not just for if I were listening to this, I would be going, here I am talking, but if I were listening, I would be going, okay, she's going to talk about meditation. I can't sit still. I don't want meditation because I can't sit still. Well, guess what? There is something called walking meditation. There's music meditation. There is action meditation. You can find a meditation that suits you, but the idea is that you shut out from the dopamine chase and you learn to accept the moment as it is. And that can be walking, that can be moving. So I'm somebody who likes music. I like to walk. So that's when I try to breathing, just to focus the attention to breathing while I'm doing something.
Deep nasal breathing, the box breathing,
yes.
right? I'm going to say, go ahead.
My food prep is a type of meditation. Like I mentioned that I do red pepper and celery and whatever. That means preparation. That's usually about 40 minutes of preparation a day. I make that a meditation. I focus on that. I like washing dishes. That's my meditation because I focus on that. So it doesn't have to be a stillness meditation.
Oh, you should come to my house. I got 2 sinkfuls.
I like cleaning. That's another meditation.
Oh, you're welcome to come to my beach retreat.
Right.
So I have to say for myself, I have always loved music from the time I was very young. I took some piano lessons. So now I de-stress a bit by practicing the piano because all I can focus on is the notes in my hands and what I'm hearing. I love music. Anybody who watches me on Instagram, I'm always put a song. I have a whole playlist. But for me, sometimes in that, somebody mentioned in the chat, what do you do to get over like that tsunami of urge and that just that compulsion feeling? If I turn on music and either in the headsets or just turn it loud and fill the room with some music I love, I can actually lose myself and lose the whole thought process of wanting food just by that. I know it seems a little crazy to some people, but
that because really what I think, I really do think that what dopamine, our urge, what is the chemical basis behind urge, or the neurochemical? That's dopamine. And I do think that ultimately we are given dopamine. We're gifted it. It's an innate quality within us so that we strive outside of ourselves, which is kind of like a spiritual quest. So if we think about, what is the purpose of dopamine, I think it is to reach for the higher power, whatever that is. And therefore, for that person who has an urge, to think, what is it that I could feed from a spiritual level? Because that is ultimately what I'm trying to do. But food is the first thing that I've been using, but it's ultimately not satisfying. So that, just to say, you're calling, you have a spiritual quest here. Go to the original source. And for you, that's music. And for me, that's something else. So that's that. The other thing I'd like to say is that if I'm feeling a strong urge, one of the things that I've found that's very helpful, which is not, if I don't want to sit still and I just don't think I can manage that, is to do something in service. And when I do something in service, I go out of myself because the dopamine urge is for me. I'm reaching for something for me. But if I do something in service, I'm doing something for somebody else. And I forget about me because I'm thinking about them. And that is tremendously fulfilling, because if it's actually something that's helpful to the person, then we have a connection, which is giving me a sense of community and connection. And
a purpose. And there's something very powerful of having a purpose in life.
Oh. Absolutely. Yes. It actually, and purpose is dopamine. So it gives you both. Well, there you go. You got it. That's it.
This happens to be the next slide. The
Perfect.
social connection, I keep pounding away at this. It
Yes.
is imperative to success. We really, as humans, want to feel we belong and that we're connected and that there's others that
Yes.
are struggling the same struggle and succeeding,
Right
and
on.
we're going to succeed with them. And,
Yeah.
addictions love isolation. And I just implore people, just join into a group. There's plenty, you've got that Facebook group. I have my membership group. I go live 5 to 6 times a week
Wow.
just to have connection with you all that are there and that I can talk with you. And
Yeah.
it's very, very powerful. And honestly, I say, I don't feel I would have the path of recovery I did without that original zeroing in on health group that I clung to. I would go to my computer in the evening and I would read, and I
Uh,
just felt so empowered having these other people surrounding me, even though it was virtual.
Yeah. And people have probably, this is not my phrase, it's a phrase out in the community. The term, the opposite of addiction is not addiction, it's connection. The opposite of addiction is connection. And that is actually very true. So when we're in addiction, we want to be isolated. But in order to no longer be addicted, we have to be connected. You cannot do this alone. You have to be connected. You just
Yeah.
have to.
I without question, I totally agree. And we're going to end with this. We really, there's 2 directions that we can go. And if you're not abstaining and not getting out of your addiction, then I truly believe you cannot possibly live life. It's a slow suicide. And
It
that's the
is.
one thing that I say about sugar is everybody else around us is laughing and eating it and pushing it and offering it and saying, what do you mean you only live once? Come on. And nobody would do that with any other drug. And to feel that we're in a society where it's so normalized, but feel so, I guess, like I'm not in the club because I'm not eating it. Everybody's going out for ice cream.
Yeah, but can I just say something to that? Those are the same people who are dying of diabetes and obesity and high blood pressure. Those are the leading causes of death today. And we should be calling that food addiction. This is the results of food. We all have to die, but we don't have to die of diabetes. We don't have to die of obesity. These are not things that people died of 100 years ago. So yes, we're calling it normal and we're normalizing these causes of death. So you are just calling out what other people, they don't want to hear that message. But this is like, really, if you're eating this stuff, these are the conditions that are inevitably going to follow.
It's a slow suicide.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
an
it's a
intentional
suicide.
slow suicide if we choose to continue eating it. And,
Mhm.
just because others around us aren't in the know.
Right. They
Other
got to
people-
take their blinders off, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, that's your job. In your YouTube, it's my job is to say to people, come on, this is not just me and my restrictive behavior. This is all of us. I just happen to go on and on about the solution, which could be your solution and hopefully will be when you finally listen.
Yeah. Most people
Listen.
who are lower on the spectrum
Yes.
have no clue
No.
that
They're going to continue on that spectrum if they're eating the foods of today.
yeah. And for those naysayers and those people who are like, yeah, I don't know, I couldn't possibly do what you do. Or some will come and say, I got to do something. I'm miserable, but I can't give up, blah, blah, blah. I go, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah, that's right.
Join the club.
Yeah,
Come
it's
on
either
over.
that, either that or it's medications in the future and a walker and a wheelchair and amputations. Choose your hard, basically.
Yes, exactly.
It's not my phrase, but I love it. Choose your hard.
Dr. Tarman, thank you so much. This has been incredible. I've, wanted to speak with you for so long, and I'm so appreciative of the opportunity. And thanks for your time. And I hope that going forward, this video will be so helpful to those who are suffering and maybe be that key point where they're willing to reach out, because it is about getting in a group, talking to others, meeting with others. Don't do this by yourself. This is the absolute. I know people who have overcome cigarettes, drugs, alcohol, and bulimia. And by far, the food addiction for that person that had all those other addictions they got rid of, said by far
Yes,
is
that's
the
my
most
experience too.
difficult addiction.
Yeah, my experience too. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you so much. And I wish you so much great going forward of spreading your word and me spreading my word so that we can help as many people as possible who are suffering.
Ditto. I agree. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for asking me to speak.
Yes. Thank you.